Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, Eva Lisa, are you enjoying the conference? Have you listened to the lady that's on now, the future? I love futurists. I think they are so clever.
No, I missed her because I was listening to the government announcement on Auckland border and traffic lights.
Oh, bugger, I missed it.
Mm.
Yay, border opening on the 15th of December.
For Auckland,
Oh,
traffic light system 29th of November.
I know, great. It's great.
Hey,
I believe that was a date you chose, Evelisa. Well done.
The 14th I had. So close.
Did you? Well done.
Yeah, I had my money on the 14th of December.
Well done. I hadn't thought about that one. Hey, this woman who owns Tech Future, oh, I don't know if she owns, I think she does, Tech Futures Lab, has just said that centralising services is not the way to go for the future. She said localising is the only way to achieve what we need to achieve and to meet and she's talking about, like, you know, robots and God, she's fascinating. I'm going to have to go back and listen to her. But when she said that, I was like, yes! There's a person far more intelligent than me saying that centralising services does not work and will not work for the future. Now she's talking about millennials, so I switched off. No.
Yeah, because you can go back and they put the recordings out at the end of the day.
Because I missed the first half of, oh, you didn't see it at all, did you? The guy Professor from Oxford.
I missed him. We had an SLT meeting.
There's nothing more enchanting to me than a person who is extremely intelligent speaking really plain English. Like, I could have listened to him for the 4 days. Then you get the, you know, bloody government ministers who are just words and not saying any. So I was really impressed with
Susie Wales's presentation. Was great.
She was great. Yeah. I loved her. Yeah, she just said, oh, the crap that's out there about misinformation and stuff. Good on her. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, some of it's good, but, you know, some of it's just rubbish and not on point.
Rubbish.
Oh, just this 4-day conference that I'm in. There's a woman at the moment that's a futurist. Is that what you say? She's New Zealander. She's just amazing.
Rubbish.
She's not rubbish, and she just said centralising services does not work and will not work for the future. I'm like, yeah. Why is the government listening to her?
Decentralise.
Yeah. But yeah, some of it's like, but others are,
Brad Olsen was interesting too, listening to his one.
I missed him. So
he's worth a watch to go back and have a look at.
I've got a whole lot of them starred that I have to go back that I missed a couple of hours today, but it's good though. Yeah, some's good, some's It's always the way with conferences, eh? There's always maybe one or two speakers that just you could you're just really spellbound by and fascinating and others that should never be on a stage or on a screen talking to people. I'm probably right in that camp.
I'm sure you know.
All right. Kia ora, everyone. Thanks for making the time to come along today.
Got your coffee?
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
I've had my coffee already today.
You're not going to live that one down easily.
No.
I thought I could put in an apology. Sorry, Chris is a bit late. He's just gone to order his coffee.
No, it's
coffee.
Jeez, yeah. I'm hearing that one. All right, so today we're here to have a chat around the implications on the transport program as a result of the decisions from the NLTP, the Waka Kotahi funding decisions that came out in the 21 to 2024 NLTP. So I understand elected members have previously received some information which has come through from Chris Allen, but today we really wanted to go through and get some guidance leading into a report which will be coming to the Infrastructure Operations Committee on the 7th of December. So I'm just trying to work through some teething issues here, but there is some information in Diligent, both in terms of a topic overview for today and also a presentation which we'll run through, and I'll just try and pull up on the screen. So just bear with us and we'll pull that presentation up, but primarily we've got Robin Denton and myself to run through a lot of the presentation, and also Chris Allen and Evelisa to support as well. So Robin, did you have anything else you wanted to?
No, that's good. Thanks, Chris.
Cool. I'll just pull the presentation up and I'll share it on the screen. If that's...
Councillor Bunting, have you had a haircut?
That I have.
Congratulations.
I lost 4 kgs.
Oh, price of wool's gone up. Huh?
I've just flooded the market. Oh, it feels amazing.
All right, so I'll just share my screen here. And all right, hopefully you can see that.
Yep, that's worked.
Great. All right, so what I'll run through, we'll just try and give a bit of an overview, and then we've got a few specific talking points that we wanted to work through. So as outlined, we're here to talk about the outcomes of the NLTP program. So obviously Hamilton City Council, based on our long-term plan, put in bids around all of the projects into the National Land Transport Program. They went through Waka Kotahi NZTA, went through the prioritisation process, and then in August came back to us with some direction around their decisions around that. So some of the projects which you'll all be aware of that we submitted into the program have been prioritised in different ways, which is what we're here to discuss today. So what we're seeking coming into the next committee meeting is a decision around some of the projects which are unlikely to receive subsidy from NZTA, and where do we want to go on those projects. So Waka Kotahi have categorised projects in 4 different ways. The funding has been approved for certain projects and programs. So a lot of those are either existing projects which are continuing, or some of the programs of work which Waka Kotahi call their continuous programs primarily. So that covers a lot of our maintenance, renewals, operational expenditure, and our low cost, low risk programs are categorised in the approved table. Probable projects are projects which they have allocated funding for in the NLTP. So they're ones that are still to work through business cases or final approval processes. So they're not yet approved, but they've been through the submissions that have come through, and effectively identified those as high priority projects which they anticipate to fund. And then there's possible projects, again, high priority activities. So ones which they haven't funded at this stage, but support that they are effectively worthy projects. And if there was additional funding opportunities, they're the ones that they've identified as possible for funding reprioritisation or not included in the NLTP. So, and we'll get in further in the table in terms of which projects have been categorised in those ways. So staff have identified primarily 4 different options for projects where funding is unlikely, or which has been the ones that are possible or not funded in the NLTP. So primarily those options are, we could still continue to complete the project or the entire program and basically forego the Waka Kotahi cost share. So that would be still delivering the full expenditure, but not receiving the revenue component that goes with that. Option B in the list there is effectively to take the component or the share that we were planning to invest from an expenditure perspective, so the 49%, and look at opportunities for us still to deliver a project in to spend effectively our share, so the net cost to HTC would still remain the same. Option C would be either to move the project, so that's from a timing perspective, or look at moving our HTC share elsewhere in the program. So that's potentially offsetting opportunities to try and make sure that we get our best bang for buck, or potentially, as I say, defer the projects to potentially a future NLTP period where we may have opportunity or revised opportunities to rebid, or where Waka Kotahi may have an opportunity to invest in those projects in a future timeframe where they don't have the funding now. Or option D is to remove those projects from the program altogether. So, sorry, Councillor Sarah, I saw you had a question there.
Thanks, Chris. Just on option C, I'm wondering what is possible. For example, for the unfunded biking micro-mobility money, could you shift that to low cost, low risk walking and cycling and actually get that potentially co-funded?
So our understanding is effectively the low cost, low risk allocations, we don't anticipate being able to do more than the current approved allocations under the low cost, low risk umbrellas. So we wouldn't be able to move the entire biking micromobility program, for instance, into low cost, low risk, and for that overall cap of low cost, low risk to increase. But potentially we would be able to reallocate some of our local share, we anticipate, within those approved umbrellas to maximise our investment, if that makes sense.
Right, okay.
And
But you essentially, there's no more, even if you're to move money to a different project, that doesn't mean you'd get any more co-funding. It's going to a different project. Is that right? Yeah,
effectively, I think the share that NZTA are going to contribute, what they're indicating at the moment is that there's not a lot of ability to potentially increase the overall cap. It's just their co-share. So if we it'd probably make a little bit more sense we get into the tables a little bit further on, but we might be able to come to that.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. And Councillor Maxine, did you have a question on some of that?
Yeah, I just, with regard to option B, if we're only using 49% of the funding, then the level of what we're producing is quite a lot lower than what's been scoped. Is that a little bit along the lines of the model that Wellington have taken up in terms of some kind of a transition, and then in later years when funding might be available, or that there might be further funds in later rounds, that we're able to complete the gold standard virtually?
Yeah, so that option is, and it notes there that that's not necessarily an option for all projects. So for a bespoke project, obviously, you can't necessarily just deliver that project for 49% of the cost. But back to Councillor Sarah's previous example of the biking micromobility program, you might be able to deliver some components of that program, so some improvements with effectively just the local share. We don't anticipate that there'd be opportunities for retrospective co-investment around that. So if we did go down that track, it would be 100% funded by HCC, and we don't anticipate the agency would come back retrospectively to provide us to co-share or co-funding around some of those investments. But sorry, I'm not overly familiar with the Wellington model and haven't familiarised myself with that one, so I can't really compare in that regard. Sorry.
So I think that, like, the Wellington model was similar to what we're putting in at the moment with some of our hit sticks and the extra greening ahead of going through and doing more permanent reallocation of that corridor space. So I guess, just supporting what Chris was saying, it really depends on the project. We've got choices when it's, lengths of retrofitting cycleways. We could attempt to do more at a lower standard. or we can do shorter amount at a higher standard. For some things such as, if it was an intersection improvement, for example, you can't actually do the intersection improvement for half the cost. It needs the full amount of money to do it. So it's a little bit case by case, and that's some of what we're wanting to talk a little bit about once we get further in.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. So just around a little bit of the financial modelling. So effectively, the gross cost, which currently sits in the possible and not funded projects, is around $42.3 million of what was effectively the gross funding in our LTP. Across those projects, we had budgeted for $17.48 million of revenue, or what we'd classed as revenue in terms of co-investment from Okakatahi to deliver those projects. So just at a level, not project by project, but across that gross funding level, we have done some financial modelling around what do those different scenarios that we talked about on the previous slide mean. So so we have tested all of the options from a funding perspective. What we've confirmed is that all the scenarios are achievable within our financial strategy, but obviously they all have different impacts on our both debt to revenue and balancing the books. For example, option A, which is just to continue to deliver this program excluding all the revenue components. Initial modelling that's come through says that yes, we can deliver that, but it puts us in a really high risk scenario, and I think our debt to revenue limits was 260%, and it puts us at 259% in around year 5. So I haven't got all of the details attached to this at the moment, and that'll be coming through on the subsequent committee reports. But obviously options C and D have a better impact from a financial strategy perspective than options A and B, which A and B effectively forego the revenue components and still look to deliver works, whereas C and D is either looking to defer the project to align with when co-investment's going to come along, or remove those projects overall. So now I'll just I'll run through.
Actually, just before you do, and back to that previous slide, is there the opportunity also though to do a bit of B and C together?
Definitely.
And so you do a little bit of both.
Yeah, 100%, and I think that's what we're looking to get out of this briefing and coming through to the recommendations in the report. Is there's probably going to be a combination of potentially all of those options across the different projects or the different portfolios of work. So yeah, it's certainly not a one size fits all, and we do anticipate probably a mixed approach to how this is going to look moving forward in terms of the decisions that get made.
Yeah, and again, I think case by case. And even in some cases, it may be we move some of the money, we do a little bit of this, we do a little bit of that. So it's a pick and mix.
That's right. Sorry. Yeah, so just to run through the program, and again, from an overall perspective, we did submit a significant bid effectively into the NLTP, and overall, a lot of it has been funded. So what we're talking about is a relatively, I mean, they're big dollars, but it's a small component of the overall program. So we have received approval and probable responses across a lot of the program, and probably in a better outcome than what we were originally anticipating early through the NLTP process. So so there's probably not too much to touch on here. We've got a continuous program, as I mentioned earlier, and a low cost, low risk program for which the funding largely approved. I'm not going to get into too much of the detail here, but we do have a little bit of rebalancing in some of the low cost, low risk items to try and make sure our local share and our LTP matches up with what the NLTP is approved, because what effectively we did through, and Robin can probably touch on it a little bit further, but through some of the projects, I think we anticipated actually a reduced program getting approved by Waka Kotahi NZTA. So we actually haven't budgeted our HCC local share across some of those projects. So that's where, back to Councillor Sarah's earlier point, we have an opportunity to potentially reallocate and rebalance. For example, in our low cost, low risk walking and cycling, that program's been approved at $10.2 million. In our LTP, we'd effectively budgeted that program at around $7.5 million. So in order to leverage the approvals that have come through from Waka Kotahi NZTA and maximise the subsidy, we also have some reprioritization opportunities effectively to maximise the Waka Kotahi investment into our program. Robin, did you have anything further on that?
No, that's good, thanks.
So the projects down the bottom here are largely approved and continuous projects. So they're continuation of existing multi-year projects, and most of you will be familiar with those, so we're not going to dwell on those ones. This page here covers another component of our improvements program, which is largely the approved funding and projects which are not yet approved but have been identified as probable. So that's where we are anticipating investment from NZTA, but those still need to work through largely either a business case process or condition approvals effectively. For example, Borman Road, the business case has been approved. However, we still need to work through the conditions attached with that final implementation piece of the program. Same with the transport centre rejuvenation. The business case has been approved. We're underway with design, but there's still a subsequent milestone just to get approval of the final implementation funding. This is where most of the possibles and the not funded in the NLTP projects are, and these are the ones we wanted to focus on in today's discussion, and probably have a bit of a discussion about each of those and what those look like. So I'll just carry on through the slides, and then we'll probably come back to these ones to maybe have a chat project by project and where we might want to go. So the projects for which we'll be seeking direction is in the biking and micromobility program. So as you could see on the slide before, there's $13 million that we'd put in the bid there that's been categorised as possible. The city centre to Uni Link, which is part of the Eastern Pathways program. So Waka Kotahi have identified the pre-implementation or the design phase as probable to receive funding, but the implementation phase is in the possible category. The CBD River Bridge, which I understand there's been some further discussions around in previous forums as well. And then there's a couple of bespoke intersection upgrades, the Heafy boundary intersection and the Norton Seton King intersection, which have been not prioritised. We also wanted to talk about some of the funding reprioritisation. So that was similar to what we discussed previously around making sure that our local share matches the funding approval so that we can maximise our NZTA investment into the program. And then if we've got time, potentially just have a chat about some of the projects and just where they're at in the life cycle just give a bit of an update and potential opportunities for timing and prioritisation of those projects. Councillor Mark.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I just had my mouth full. Yeah, there's one more I didn't see on there, and that was the eastern end of Clauden's Bridge to Ruakura, that link up Te Araha. I thought that was going to be up for discussion at some point as well.
Yeah, Robin, did you want to touch on that one?
So that's not a specific project that we have in the NLTP. As a line item in itself, that gets picked up in that connections path or a part of the Eastern Pathways.
Oh, so it's in the connections
It's
path.
a project. It's a project within a program. So that's why you don't see it as a specific line.
Oh, I see.
So
okay.
Yeah, so some of these are so some of those kind of interventions, they might be projects within, say, an Eastern Pathways or a biking micromobility program. And so yeah, so there are implications to those individual projects, and potentially as we get into it, we can talk about if there are key priorities, if we did want to go down a track of potentially investing some of our local share into delivering projects. It would then need to go through a prioritization exercise in terms of picking what those projects might be. Councillor Rob, do you have a question at this point?
Thanks, Chris. Just looking at just a question on the CBD River Bridge, and I'm looking back at the previous slide. Where on that slide was our application for funding for that? Because my understanding is that the total bridge cost is about, let's say, 34 million. I don't see any figures of that magnitude on that previous slide.
So that project, it's a 4-year project. So some of the costs so this table here covers the first 3 years of the NLTP period.
I see.
But some of the funding that we'd allocated in our LTP was in year 4. So the total cost for that project, yes, it is as you outlined. But what we've effectively put up in the bid at the moment is through the first 3 years, and that's what NZTA have made a decision on. So you're correct, and the assumption around that project is that HCC would contribute a component. There was also anticipated to be a component of
external funding.
External funding outside of Waka Kotahi, and also a component which was from Waka Kotahi NZTA. So that is still the case. That's
so in other words, if NZTA had approved the funding, there would have been a contingent liability for them to fund the remainder of the cost in the 4th year, which of course isn't in this application.
Yes, correct. So
okay. So they've said it's possible. That means that is less than probable, isn't it?
Yeah, correct. It means that they haven't allocated funding in the NLTP budget profiles currently towards that project. But I think, as has been outlined in previous discussions, and some of the elected members have probably been a little bit close to that through some of the discussions with Waka Kotahi NZTA as well. There are looking at avenues to continue to progress that project through some of the business cases and look at other avenues for co-funding for that project as well, I understand.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.
So I'll run through the list of questions if that's all right, Angela. So Councillor Mark, did you?
Was that me?
Yep.
Yeah, that was my question. Was where was the Taraha thing? But that's been asked and answered. Thanks by Robin before. I have some things to say, but I'll do that later. I'll wait for questions. Thanks.
All right. Mayor Paula.
Thank you. Interesting. I was looking at the list that could, you're talking about reprioritization and so on. It would help me to understand where we get the biggest bang for the buck in terms of our prioritization, and if we're going to go and push on government, for example, for more money from their budget that hasn't been spent elsewhere, like on the bridge in Auckland or what have you. if we were to do that, where do we go first? What is likely to be most successful for whatever reasons, and what is going to bring us the best bang for the buck, the most outcomes for that effort?
Yeah, Chris Allen, if you're on the line, I understand you've been potentially doing some of the work around that. Would you be able to jump in and answer that question?
Look, it's only my view, but I think it might be a view shared by others. I think the best bang for the buck is getting into a position in our biking and micromobility, the River Bridge and Eastern Pathways, where we're poised, ready to go and receive funding, whether it's through the NLTP or other sources that might arrive, through climate change. But I think making progress and just getting those projects ready to go, they're well aligned with government policy, emerging policy funding opportunities, and I think it's just essential that we just keep going and developing those projects, not so much delivering them, but particularly the River Bridge, just being ready to have a business case that's well anchored in strategy and well anchored with biking and micromobility and Eastern Pathways. That would be my view, and I'm sure that's probably shared by a number of people.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. What has helpful to me, because I understand that in a previous meeting that we had, Council indicated they would like me to knock on government's door and to make it quite clear that we're open for business and some more of their funding. And I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to write to the Minister and support that. Just need that level of understanding, and that you're talking about how it aligns to their outcomes and our outcomes. That's what I need to know. I don't want to end up plucking one thing or another. I'd rather go after what we thought we could get greatest success in. And I like your ideas, Chris. So at some stage, someone will have to talk to me. And, I know it's Angela's committee through the infrastructure. Someone will have to guide me as to how we put that together and what the next steps are, please.
Yeah, and I think myself and even Lisa have been sort of working on a letter or a prompt to ministers to sort of move in that direction. Yeah. Yeah,
Sarah talked to me about that last night, and that was really helpful. And as I said to her, I need to know what exactly I'm asking for and why. And then I will gladly do it alongside Angela to the Minister on our behalf. Just need to understand that. But good that you're doing that work, Chris. Thank you.
With Eva, Elisa, and I think we're joined up in that approach if Eva Lisa's on the line. Yeah.
I think we need to make some haste with that, I guess.
All right.
That's my understanding as well, because I think the intelligence is that there may be funding opportunities coming out just after Christmas. So certainly, getting a plug-in or position ourselves prior to Christmas, particularly for that bridge, I think would be really important.
Okay. Well, we haven't got many working weeks left, but I'll get back to you on that one now that we've had that discussion. Thanks.
Councillor Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, look, agree totally with what Chris was just saying then. And I suppose in response to Rob's question, I was just going to flag that there's almost a sort of process that we're waiting for in terms of getting the biking and micromobility case, sort of a business case approved by NZTA, and then the Eastern Pathways is my understanding, or the University Link, before the bridge can kind of be slotted in. Is that a fair comment? We've got a sort of process that we're trying to get through. So I guess to me it kind of makes sense to keep it there on ice and not flag it, because we may yet get a win once we get those other business cases sorted. Yeah,
that's right. And so agree with your comment there. And obviously a lot of the these biking and micromobility projects, which is Eastern Pathways and the bridge, they're premised under the biking micromobility program business case, which so obviously if we can get that anchored and well endorsed by the agency, then it creates a really good anchor for a lot of these further projects to get to be assessed more favourably.
Cool.
Can I just jump in there, Chris? Like the most disappointing line to me, Jeff, was that possible for the single stage business case for the bridge. So I think that's the one that we need to target particularly and keep going on. If they're not going to co-fund us a business case, I think that's where we should put our energy into. And I think there's just huge alignment with biking and micromobility and Eastern Pathways, and there's a great story that you can tell that integrates them. But that's the one I think that we definitely should be targeting and just progressing in the meantime.
Cool. Is that the 100k or the 400k in year one?
That's the 100k one, yeah.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, Chris.
Councillor Angela?
Thanks, Chris. Hey, so I just guess following on from that, in terms of the bridge, how did we get it so wrong? How did we not, I mean, in terms of mode choice, that pedestrian and cycle and mode choice bridge is a critical piece of infrastructure, and yet we didn't, you know, I remember sitting in our workshops on the bike when we were putting together the biking and micromobility, and we did have several times have to ask for that bridge plus the northern one, future northern one, to be included. So why are we, I mean, was it, I can't even remember now, and I read the entire biking and micromobility business case, but why have we ended up in this situation? My understanding is the NZTA didn't, for some reason, thought it was more of a political project rather than a mode choice key piece of infrastructure. So how do we, can we slip it back into something? I mean, seriously, I think it's a bit of a fail on our part.
Yeah. Councillor, others could correct me, but that would be my observation as well. Like, I don't think we've failed at all.
Okay.
I think that there's a view in NZTA that it was more a spot project than a driven outside strategy. Like, I think we worked hard to pull it into strategy, but I think we just ran out of timing in terms of the announcement of the NLTP. But I definitely do not think this one's lost, because I think we know it's such a critical path of university link and biking and micromobility. So I think it's definitely salvageable, and we've got the time to do that. That would be my view, and we just need to test that and just anchor it more in strategy than it was.
But so how do we do?
I'm not sure.
How do we do that though? Because I mean, NZTA is working with staff to go through the business case for biking and micromobility now, and the bridge is not included, right? So how do we? Can we put in? Can we get an appendix?
It is included, but I think it's about understanding that there's business cases and there's layers of business cases we need to work through. So the biking and micromobility looks across the whole network, and then you end up with projects and programs that fall out of that. So that's the highest level, and the aim is to get that in front of the board early next calendar year. So that's really a critical one. And then we've got the CBD to Uni Link. So landing that high level biking and micromobility then justifies, because that will show as one of the key routes that we need to develop, and will also help with the prioritization. So that's when your CBD Uni Link comes through, and that's where we can run in parallel that the CBD river crossing as part of that. So it is still about making sure we work through the process with Waka Kotahi. So I think the biggest problem really is just timing, and the time it takes to land some of these strategic business cases and get them right, such that these other programs and projects fall underneath them.
But there's no way, there is no way for us to achieve any NZTA funding for this bridge in the next 3 years.
I think we that's the point, and making it like we should just keep the momentum going and be in the best position possible, because time has showed us time and time again that funding does become available when people
Yeah.
are not spending or new sources come on.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
There, because possible is not a great signal,
Yeah.
and that's why I was so disappointing that they wouldn't co-fund the business case.
Yeah.
But we've got the ability to progress that, and the trick will be to have NZTA at the table, even though they're not funding it. But being on the journey, as Robin just said, they need to be there and understand that whole business case development, and just make sure all the right boxes are being ticked, so we don't get to the end and they say, well, we haven't bought into that business case. So that's the tricky bit, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Councillor Sarah, did you have a question on this?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So in terms of the river bridge, the walking and cycling bridge, say if we put in, you fully fund the business case, do you think we'll be able to get Waka Kotahi to work alongside of us? Because, like, I mean, I'm keen to do that, and my concern is just whether they're going to kind of say, oh, well, we're working on these other projects first, this isn't a priority for us.
Yeah, so my suggestion around that is if we don't have them at the table as part of that business case process, it's going to be like we need to have them there and engaged in the process with us. I think what they've indicated to us to date is subject to the outcomes of the micro mobility program business case, and if that, as anticipated, identifies this connection as a key component, then they'll work with us to do further investigation around that bridge. So that's where the biking and micromobility program business case becomes really important as the strategic anchor for these continuing projects. I think while we want to continue the work, we do need to make sure, like I say, that we've got Waka Kotahi at the table and we're not just doing it on our lonesome, because otherwise there is a risk that they may not. Like, we need to follow their processes and their formats and hopefully have them integrated into the process, which is going to give us a lot higher likelihood of getting a favourable outcome at the end, I'd suggest.
Okay, thank you. And that biking and micromobility program could be approved by March next year? That's
what we currently anticipate. It is going up to, we're anticipating getting it in front of the board for approval of the business case, which will then basically anchor that prioritisation of key projects moving forward is the current plan.
Okay, all right, thank you. And a question around boundary Heaphy intersection. So that didn't feature in the NLTP at all, but a bit like, I guess, the roundabout we're putting in over in Gordonton Road. This is an area where I think a lot of us are quite concerned around the safety issues there, and I'm just wondering, I know we've looked at multitude of options for this site. Is there anything that we could do at a low cost temporary basis, even if it was only at 3 legs of this roundabout, or just putting, even an improvement on what we've got for now?
So we've got funding in this year's low cost, low risk walking and cycling to do some work a bit further away from the intersection, but not too far, to actually improve the ability to get across the road. And in addition to that, we've also got the proposed signalised crossing, PED crossing, closer to the Whitiora Bridge and around that Casey Oakley sort of area, which will not only give people a great opportunity to get across Boundary Road to use the 1 footpath that we have on Whitiora Bridge, but also links to the bus stops that we've got there. So I think the big reason why this didn't get funded is because there needs to be, from a Waka Kotahi perspective, a better understanding as to how this all fits with the cross-city connector. So that, I think, is the piece of work that needs to be done, is looking at the cross-city connector. Obviously, this is a key intersection. You've got the bridge, Whitiora Bridge itself. What is that going to look like in the future? 5 Crossroads is a key intersection, not only for cross-city connector, but also Eastern Pathways. And then you've got the hook right through 5th Ave to finally that Ruakura transport corridor as well. So that is the sort of strategic thinking they're looking for us to be putting in place before they dive into doing that intersection.
Okay. Is that something that you would see then, I see would have probably 100,000 local share allocated at the moment for that first year and then another in the next year. Do you think it would be a good idea to reallocate that towards that piece of thinking work, or is that something that you would say, yeah, what level of priority would you give that, and what would you recommend around beyond doing the, yeah, what we should do with that local share now?
So others might have other ideas, but my thoughts are I think this is actually going to become really quite critical with the NPSUD and some of that thinking of intensification and you know, the Ruakura growth and all of those sorts of things. The cross-city connector, I think, is a really important one to land at least a business case in that high-level thinking. It's not necessarily saying that you're going to rush out and do any work anytime soon, but at least you've done the forward thinking to understand what needs to be done and, you know, what triggers are we looking for, when would we look at doing some of those things.
So just further to that, in our overall LTP, there was a project more towards the back end, I think, of the LTP, maybe years 8, 9, 10, which was a planned investigation of the cross-city connector and potentially a designation through that corridor. Again, obviously it didn't go through for questions to Waka Kotahi in terms of the NLTP and potential prioritisation because of the timing of that project, but as you say, there is a potential opportunity to look at the timing and prioritisation of that potentially, and maybe have a discussion with Waka Kotahi to say, would that be something you'd potentially be interested in co-investing with us in? I don't know what the answer would be, but yeah, that might be an opportunity to have a discussion around.
Okay, thank you. Final question was just with the low cost, low risk walking and cycling, it sounded like they allocated more money than what we've kind of provided for in our budget. What is the difference in that first year? Because I'm wondering, could you move our local share of biking micromobility into low cost, low risk walking and cycling and then get that work done that way?
Yes.
Yes.
Robin, what is the difference?
I think Chris has got more screens up than I have.
So overall across the 3 years, it was about $7.5 million. So you can see in year one, what Waka Kotahi has approved is about 3.5 and then 4.65 and 2. So in our LTP, we basically budgeted for $2.5 million per year. So effectively, I think we've got about $500,000 of local share in year one that we need to move across into this bucket to maximise the low cost, low risk allocations. And then, basically $1 million of local share in year two, but we could balance that out across the 3 years. It's about $2.5 million of gross cost, or effectively $1.25 million of HCC share, which, there is an opportunity to reallocate from biking and micromobility into that, which is to maximise delivery under that program.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Maxine.
Just going back to Mayor Paula's point about advocacy to the minister, and thinking about our CBD bridge and where it sits in terms of the whole of the program, under the programs and more into the projects. It strikes me that ministers are much more interested in some of the projects rather than maybe the whole of that. And if we're able to tell our story in a couple of different ways to each of the people that we're going to be advocating to, waka kotahi, get the whole of the program, but that we could pick out some of the project stuff that might capture the imagination, let's say, of the minister or others, that might be a useful way in order to be able to do that. And are we going to be using those kinds of strategies to do that?
Yeah,
I agree,
Chris?
Councillor Max, but I would say that having any project grounded in a good strategic business case will also really probably improve your chances of getting the funding really dramatically. Yes, it's great to have some ribbon cutting opportunities, but I think even the Auckland Harbour Bridge is a classic example of, yes, they got excited about something that was going to look good for a ribbon cutting and was something that captured ministers' imaginations and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, it didn't have a good business case sitting behind it. It wasn't well understood and costed in those implications. So that's where doing that background homework and getting those things lined up becomes really critical for actually getting the cash and actually doing the work.
And you've got the confidence. Oh, sorry, Martin.
Dare I say it, the cycling lobby were hopeless. I mean, in terms of strategically who you make friends with, I think it's really important with these projects you make sure you have friends out there as well in terms of their response. It's just a very unprofessional intervention. I apologise.
It's okay. But I'm just going to say, is it really obvious and clear in our business case that the micromobility has, some great projects that sit within it, that you don't have to wade through too much information in order to be able to, capture the imaginations of those that are making the decisions, and to be able to ground it in really good evidence that it will meet both, government's threshold for a ribbon cutting, but also their goals that are being set in environment and other, other goals that they have.
I think business cases are not designed to be necessarily easily consumable by the public, but they certainly provide that really core evidence and that technical stuff. So I think that the business case has a role to play, and then we've got to work out how we actually give some of those really core projects and that sort of thing that additional visibility.
Yep.
So
can I just jump and build on that, Rob, because that's the answer I was going to get. Like some time ago, I was tasked with drafting something up to, put to ministers, and Maxine, I think you're spot on. I think it's, at a staff level in our business cases, and it's very complicated and hard to get cut through and excitement with my opinion, and it's probably excluded, but the ministers get told, by the NTA and tech, a bit of excitement about some projects in there would be useful when we're talking to ministers, and the bridge stands out, and maybe it's a bit more granularity on some of the
You're kind of cutting out there a bit, Chris.
Is a good way to messaging to try and hit
Sorry, Chris, I can't hear a thing you're saying. It's kind of like listening to NZTA's logic.
Yeah, so I think make pointable to them.
So I think from what I got from Chris, it is fairly much it's similar to what I was saying, that the biking and micromobility, the business cases have a key role to play in providing that technical work. They will help us identify and prioritise the key projects that you can take out. We then have a piece of work to do to really highlight those key projects and those opportunities, so that we put them into a form and format and style that is then consumable, easily consumable by the public, politicians and those sorts of things, so that we can do that. And that's that final piece of work that Martin Parks is working on at the moment, is getting that bit of modelling work done so that we can really get those prioritisations right.
Cool.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Councillor Mark, did you?
Yep. Yeah, thanks. It wasn't just my internet with Chris, was it? It was just...
No.
Oh, good. Okay, beauty. Cool. Yeah, I'm perhaps coming at this from a slightly different angle with regards to this discussion. I get, obviously the need for business cases and the big funding, co-funding opportunities. But can I suggest we come at this from a tactical angle as well? Because I'm thinking, okay, I think it's likely we will get funding, co-funding for the bridge, but that is going to take quite some time. And I wonder if there's room in this discussion for the tactical, more immediate stuff that we could do to a lower standard to at least connect the connections, as it were, and those that are reasonably immediately dangerous as well. And the reason I'm bringing this up is actually Sarah bringing up the Boundary Road, Heafy Terrace intersection. That's, I would presume, an accident waiting to happen. And is there an opportunity to fund stuff just ourselves, get stuff just done until we can get the proper stuff in?
Yeah. So I think Chris B, it's probably worth just trying to push on to the end of the presentation now.
Yeah. Okay.
And because some of that sort of pops up there, and so I think timing is kind of right just to move forward.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks, Robin.
so I'll go through because there's a few opportunities there, and then we'll probably come back and maybe have a chat on some of these items on a project by project level to see, kind of just get your thoughts on potential options there. So I'll quickly go through. So we've been through this one. So these are some of the alternative projects that potentially could get considered. So these are potential projects that are within the biking and micromobility program at the moment. So if the funding was approved under the biking and micromobility program, this is a list of some of the key projects that were planned to get delivered under it. So effectively what we're saying here or asking here is if Waka Kotahi aren't going to currently come to the party with co-funding investment, are there some of these or all of these that potentially we may still want to proceed with either through reinvestment of our local share component or effectively foregoing the revenue or the Waka Kotahi co-investment around it. So Robin, did you want to talk through any of those specifically?
I don't think so. I think we can probably jump to the next one and then kind of the final slide, and then probably jump back, because I suspect for elected members, these are just some seeds to think about, and what we're really looking for is for you to give us some direction so that we can go away and work up some actual numbers and that sort of thing. So we're not necessarily going to land the exact thing today, but there are a whole lot of projects floating around there. The blue box on the left, unfortunately, hasn't been fully populated, but we have a report coming to the Infrastructure Ops Committee in December on a couple of big studies that Martin Parks has been working with Regional Council on. And these are things like intersection improvements and pedestrian improvements, so that these routes can actually operate really well and efficiently. So yeah, I think without going into too much detail, unless elected members have got specific questions, we can probably jump to the what do we want out of the workshop, and then that gives us sort of half an hour to then talk through specific, perhaps line by line projects as to how you would like to see a mixture. And I think the big thing here is we're not suggesting that for each line you have to choose, each project or program, you don't have to pick an A, B or C or D. You could actually do a bit of a combo with them.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess direction we're after out of today has kind of already gone through. So we're looking on, we've got a report coming plan to come back to the Infrastructure Operations Committee in early December, where we will be looking to seek some direction and decisions in terms of what we plan to do with some of these projects moving forward. So we're keen to get direction on preferred options. Are there any other options that you'd like to see covered in the report, or options you want us to build up further? Alternative projects that maybe we could or should be considering, and then if there's anything else you'd like covered in that report coming up. So
I guess the focus really is this financial year. What are we going to do this financial year? Because some of the stuff we can pick up and sort out through the annual plan process as well for out years. But it's really this financial year that's the one that we need to kind of focus on and potentially get going on some of these things too. Yeah, you're right. And from an implementation perspective, I think 100% keen to focus on this year, and then some of the other components, the longer term projects, we're keen to understand what are we baselining to go into the annual plan discussions and deliberations around as well. Indicatively, what direction do we want to go into to inform some further decision making? So not sure if some of the questions kind of general or project specific. I guess we can jump through and go through some of the questions from here, and we can then come back to the specific projects and what some of the potential options or recommendations may be. So, Mayor Paula, I see you've got your hand up still. I'm not sure if that's from previously or if you've got a current question.
It's still up.
All right.
No.
That's cool.
It's on, sorry.
That's right. Councillor Sarah.
Thanks, Chris. So are we giving thoughts on just generally now, or were you wanting to go through line by line?
Yeah, I think if we take some thoughts generally, and then we'll go back line by line, and we'll probably try and leave ourselves 20 minutes to go back there, if that's okay. Okay,
cool. Thank you. So I think for some of these things, we can wait, we'll be able to wait until annual plan, and by then we may even be fortunate to have gotten some funding. But for the ones, the bridge, I would be quite keen to progress the business case side of things with our funding, unless, once we've done the biking micro-mobility program and it's an approved, Waka Kotahi actually says, yep, we'll co-fund. So the other thing is with the biking and micro-mobility, I think it would be a good idea to take 500,000 of that approximately, because there's about a $1.5 million local share there. Take 500k and put that towards balancing out the low cost, low risk money. So then you can maximize that in that first year. So I understand then you'd get $1 million out of that. And then I'd be quite keen to progress just with that remaining local share, at least, of the bike and micro-mobility money, some of those transitional projects. And I think in terms of, the low cost, low risk and that remaining biking and micro-mobility funding, a couple of priorities. One would be that Heafy boundary grey intersection, which then could connect up Te Araha, Ruakura, and then all the way to university, to that, using that nice upgraded piece of infrastructure there. So so we use that funding to do the intersection, and then the connections funding, I understand, to do the rest of that. And another priority, I think, would be connecting to whatever we do at that intersection at Collingwood and Tristram, actually connecting some stuff to it. So the Western Rail Trail and Ward Street to that intersection, and then also along Collingwood back into the city centre again. I think there's opportunities there where you might do a mix of, say, cycle lanes and sharrows to minimise your parking loss, but have a safe route going back in. Have and there are a few other things that I think we should look at. Like I do think Killarney Road's a good idea, doing improvements there. But whatever we do should be absolutely connected to existing infrastructure. So we're building on what we've got. That's all for now.
All right. Councillor Martin.
Nodded my head off to that.
Yeah, sorry. Just a clarification. The just alternative projects that could be considered that are actually on your radar. How do you define pit lane?
So this was a report that we had previously taken to an infrastructure ops committee. And this was the small piece on Seddon Road. So it's not the section of pit lane next to Kaute Pacifica. It was the piece that was to the west of Seddon Road, which the West Town Belt did identify as being potential for parking. So that funding would enable us to formalise that and put a bit of green in amongst it, which are both things that the West Town Belt master plan had identified.
That's adjacent to what I think is at Mill Lane. It's the old part of Mill
Yes,
Street.
yes, that's right. The old Mill Street.
If you put a bracket just adjacent to Mill Lane, and then I wouldn't sort of have a heart attack.
Yes.
But your answer
That's
is extremely positive. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Martin.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Robin. Endorsing very much what Sarah said. First of all, I want to march on with the business case for the bridge, obviously. But in principle, I think anything we need to do from here on in needs to be connected to one point, if not two. And we are so close with some of our brilliant infrastructure that's getting built that we've got a really good opportunity to have maximum bang for our buck now with a lot less spent. So with that in mind, I'd heartily endorse the Heafy Grey Claudins intersection with that extension along to the new Ruakura paths. And that's obviously not going to be the ultimate university link, but it's going to build up cycling between university and town safely. So when we do put a proper one in there down the track, it's going to work. So for me, definitely the bridge, definitely the Claudins Bridge, Claudins Road to Araha, whichever way you go up there to Ruakura, and also endorsing if we are going to put something in Collingwood Street, like a Dutch roundabout, then it does need good connections into town. And Sarah speaks a lot of sense when she's talking about particularly the one down Collingwood Street into town, because we were talking about the east-west fusion dining thing there. If we were to sharrow that straight away, it starts to begin that behaviour change for traffic down there. So it does make it less jarring when it comes to a point where we may shut it down on the weekends for food, etc. So it's a good step, like I was talking about before. So, and it's a reasonably unobtrusive way down there, and it's not that disruptive either. Plus connecting Collingwood Street to Ward Street as well. So yeah, absolutely on in tune with Sarah's point there, exactly. So yeah, and I didn't see that on there, and like you say, it's buried away in the micro mobility plan, but I'd like to elevate that up a little bit, that Claudins to Ruakura link.
If you go up one, yeah. Okay, so we've got the intersection, but we haven't got that link.
That's right. Yeah.
There. So
yeah.
It's
and
cool.
Look,
Thank you.
It doesn't have to be gold plated, to the standard of the Cook Street project. But if it's connected, so we're there. We've got a link from the university virtually to the far end of the Western Rail Trail, which is pretty stunning.
So the Te Aroha Grey Street is part of the Eastern Pathways connections as well. So that is part of the approved.
Absolutely, and look, we're not talking green lines, but we're not talking much more at this point. I'm sure, and the Eastern Pathways will be able to flesh that up and make that a bit more gold plated as we go. But if we connect, I think, boy, we've got such great opportunities at the moment with this.
Yeah. So that's that Wellington Street model. We go in and do the cycle wands, bit of green stuff, make it safer, noting that in time we will get to a separated full standard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're getting separated where you possibly can. And there's only about 3 or 4 blocks down Te Aroha Street that are going to be a bit of a squeeze, but I've seen what you guys have done with Anzac Bridge, so I'm very hopeful.
Right, Councillor Ryan.
Thanks. Hey, look, largely agree with the approach so far. from my colleagues, but I was just thinking, what's the not the overspend, but what's the unbudgeted surplus we've got from Wakatakahi? Did you say 3.5 million?
Sorry, in terms of the
where we budgeted an expectation from them, and in some cases they exceeded it.
Oh, so of these projects, the ones where we're looking to reprioritize. Yeah. So that was around 2.5 million.
I'm just wondering, should we maybe, or have you already kept it, say, 1 million aside as a contingency, just in case one of the possibles doesn't eventuate and then we're on the back foot with the deficit? Should we just keep some aside rather than committing all of it with new projects?
Yep, and those are considerations, I guess, as we go through some of the project by project to understand. Yep, 100%. Those are options which need to get considered.
So, is that some feedback you're looking for today?
Yes. So that's good to understand to make sure again that we're not. How much do we want to push the envelope? I guess is one of the questions.
Okay, well, appreciate. There's a few more people to go through and stuff, but I guess I'll put a placeholder in now that, maybe the quantum can be negotiated. But I would have thought putting $1 million aside now, given we haven't even started our annual plan process, might be prudent, just so we're not caught out.
So that's effectively $1 million of our local share, effectively, that you're talking about as a.
Yeah, and that leaves 1.5 million still to rebalance.
All right. Yep. We can
Thanks.
make sure that's captured in the recommendations moving forward. Yep.
Thanks. Good presentation.
Mayor Paula, did you have a comment?
I do. Thank you. I do. There again, I'm happy with a lot of the projects here. I'm relying on what you were talking about before, which is the best business case plus the readiness factor. So I like the idea of connected progress as opposed to bits and pieces here and there. That's the other criteria that I'd be looking at. Could it go? If we went, yes, let's do it. Could it go straight? Could we get on with it? Is it connecting other pieces of infrastructure or places that are critical, and we can get mileage out of that, if you like, as opposed to a new area. And safety, of course, we already agreed through our transport work, and I imagine it'll sit in the Access Hamilton work that you're doing, Angela, that safety was a priority. So safety, connectivity, and ability to get on with it. Notwithstanding what we all said about the bigger project around the bridge and connectivity, which I agree with also. So look, I don't have, I'm not going to get down into the kitchen or the detail and tell you which one of these. I just need assurances that whatever floats to the surface ticks those boxes, and the more well-beings it ticks off, the better for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxine, and then I'll probably jump back up to the list and we can maybe have a bit more of a detailed discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I too share views of other speakers today. I think that when we're looking at any of these projects, that we have some principles that we do want to tick off, and certainly connectedness is absolutely one of them. Bang for buck, making sure that there's other ways that we can do projects with a bit of paint, some hit sticks. That's a really good alternative, I think, as a short term and a transitional kind of a way, in order to be able to get the infrastructure down, getting it used by the public, getting public on board with connected ways of being able to get around the city safely with all ages and stages. Really helps to be able to double those projects in future years and get really good support, and hopefully not deal with some of the other resistance that we've had when we're weighing up whether it's a cycle lane or a car park or a whatever else. So connectedness, I've talked about that, but also, that pathway of least resistance is something worthwhile considering as well, because, if we can put some infrastructure down Collingwood Street and have that sympathetic to the businesses and development that's there in a less conflicted way, then that's just much more helpful in order to be able to deliver other projects in the future. And I'm thinking about Collingwood Street in terms of the speed limit that's down there, because is that something else, Robin, that we would need to consider in terms of meeting Victoria Street, which is now at 30 kilometres an hour, would we want that piece of or parts of that, especially if it's going to turn into an international eatery, then we would want that at lower speeds as well. So it's kind of it from me in terms of the bridge. Really like the idea of being able to get in front of the minister and capture minds around that, and doing that business case on our own. It's not a bad idea in order to be able to do that, and then reprioritise some of the money out of the biking and micro mobility into low cost, low risk. Sits well with my thinking too.
All right,
Kia ora.
thank you. So what I'd suggest is maybe we'll go through some of the possibles and not funded here, and potentially try and form a bit of a view around what are those recommendations upcoming in the report based on the discussions that we've had to date. So not sure whether I'll start with the hardest one or not, but I'll give it a go. So biking micro mobility. So what we've heard out of that, effectively, there was $13 million budgeted in our long-term plan around that project, or around that program of works, with an HCC share of around 6.37. So what we've heard is there's a desire or a general appetite to reprioritise some of that local share to the low-cost, low-risk walking and cycling, so that we can leverage that program of works, which would be around $1.25 million of the HCC share, or equivalent to about $2.5 million gross cost. So what that would leave within that program then is effectively $5 million of local share, that across the 3-year program, that or a $10 million gross cost, I guess, leveraged off that. And so keen to get an appetite, if we were coming back with a prioritised list of implementation, what kind of dollar figure are we looking at over potentially those 3 years, and what would council have the appetite to invest in from basically without co-funding? So are we looking at saying, let's take our local share that we'd budgeted in our LTP, which was around $5 million, and look for projects that maybe is equivalent to around that, or is it a little bit less or a little bit more? Or potentially are we just looking, because what I'm hearing is there's not really an appetite just to defer that entire program out altogether and not do anything in that, acknowledging that there is still a big program of low cost, low risk walking cycling implementation, which goes alongside this as well. But just keen to get some feedback on that in terms of an appetite for reinvestment of particularly the local share component, or alternatively to reinvest the entire program, or to continue to deliver the entire program unsubsidized. Does anyone have a thought? Councillor Sarah?
Thank you. I would be keen to look at the option where you rebalance out the first year of walking and cycling low cost, low risk, but then reallocate the rest of our local share to biking and micromobility. There's projects like the Heafy Claudelands grey intersection this year, and then in our annual plan, once we have more information around whether or not other projects have gotten co-funding by then, we can decide what to do around rebalancing the remaining of the walking and cycling. But that would be my preference, so we can address some safety issues now, like our community is kind of expected, but still and maximise the walking.
The Friday weather's stunning. Should we go to Raglan on Friday night?
Andrew.
Yeah, okay. Fish and chips are good.
Hey, Chris, he's just
sorry.
I should have let him keep going. You might have outdone me.
There's quite an interesting backstory, but I won't share. My apologies.
All right.
Add it to the bloopers award.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Mark, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think we should go to Raglan. Yeah, no, very much in line. God, Sarah, I'm just turning a bit of a parrot here, but very much in line with Sarah. We've got to get some connections. We've got to get some stuff down. We could wait forever. So, I mean, it's like I said to a couple of people over the last couple of days, Robin, you remember we had this very same discussion this time last term, and we just got some stuff down. So, I pretty much said what I said earlier on. So yeah, I'm all for bringing a bit forward. I quite like Ryan's idea of holding some contingency, but I think we've got to get some action happening. Okay. Don't be embarrassed, Andrew. We all go to Raglan from time to time.
Yep. So what I'm hearing out of that is a general appetite to still progress with some of those projects potentially and go it with local share, but just moderating that program to the right level.
Because just looking at a sociological level, we are nearly connected. So nearly connected, and all the research around the world points to the fact that once you are connected, up goes the participation. So if nothing else, I won't have Rob Pascoe nagging me that no one's on the Claudelands Bridge. So I just think we've got some really great opportunities for some great wins if we have the cojones to bring a little bit of that money forward.
Yeah, and part of that story as well is understanding which components of the low cost, low risk walking, cycling are going to help contribute towards some of those outcomes as well, and making sure those programs work hand in hand. So
indeed, great. Thank you, guys.
Cool. All right. So if there's no other, I think that gives us a bit of a steer in terms of a recommendation on that project.
Just my hand. Sorry. Yep. Just to I want to 100% support what you just said about. It's exactly what I was saying before, that it's where we get the best gain in the shortest period of time, and we can do it. But that has to be supported by the data that staff put up, because we're not the experts. We're just the overall guiders of the process. And I look down that list and I see so many. I look down the list and think there's many, many valuable projects there. I just also don't want to be a dampener on this, but we have to be mindful of coming up into the annual plan. We can make some adjustments there, and that's positive. We can really have a look at where our budgets are sitting. We can make some adjustments within budget. But I understand that some of the costs around civil construction and so on, and the delays are real. In fact, I was on the, and Angela was also, we were both on the infrastructure New Zealand conference, and one of the economists made it quite clear that although, we may want to construct and we may even get the funding to construct, there still may be some constraints and some increased costs. So I just think we need to be mindful of doing the most we can for every dollar that we spend, because I suspect there's going to be an increase in some of that. I think the economist Angela was saying that asphalt had gone up nearly 40%. Is that what he said yesterday? Anyway, it was an incredible amount of cost rising across civil construction projects and a labour shortage, even though 14,000 new jobs in construction, which was a fascinating fact, we're still well behind what is required to get all this work done on time. So I imagine within our organisation, we have access to staff, but we'd still be subject to appreciating costs and things like that.
Yeah, 100%. It is a very challenging environment at the moment, and we're certainly seeing the effects of cost escalation. Particularly we're anticipating that on new tenders that we're putting out and new jobs. We've seen indices in terms of cost escalation, which have exceeded expectations, particularly over the last 3 to 4 quarters, and probably anticipated to continue over the next couple of quarters as well, at least. So that is putting a lot of pressure, and will continue to put pressure on budget allocations that we had loaded in the LTP. We made some of these budget estimations quite a long time ago, so there are going to be challenges in that space, which we're going to need to understand and face up to as these projects come through to market.
And so, Chris, does that mean that some of our bigger projects will likely be more affected than the smaller projects that need less, or does it not really work like that? Is it just timing in the industry to what, the availability of the
I think the cost,
labour?
Yeah, I think the cost pressures are happening across the board. So I'd say, so big projects are going to be, I'd say, equally as affected as small projects. So
it's just get in the queue.
I think for us, and some of this is going to be how do we get underway with implementation sooner rather than later, because at the moment costs are continuing to go up. So, but
I think that's where the Wellington model potentially gives us some opportunities where we're using some of those things like cycle wands and those sorts of opportunities, which allow us to get something down. It's not the ultimate, but it is an improvement on what's there, and does give people the opportunity to get a degree of comfort with what we're perhaps proposing to do in the longer term. So, those sorts of projects actually give us some real opportunities to still deliver some good stuff out there with perhaps less impact on some of these other, rising costs.
Sorry, that's good. Just conscious of time as well. So I wanted to kind of go through some of these other lines just to talk about what the recommendation might be, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor Ryan. Sorry for jumping in there. So I think the Eastern Pathways, City Centre to Uni Link, and the CBD walking cycling bridge, I think we've had a discussion around that. Obviously, the pre-implementation for the City Centre to Uni Link is probable, and I think we've spoken about there's a desire to at least progress the business case component of the bridge. And we'll look at whatever avenues we can use to progress that, whether that's utilising this the local share commitment that we've got, or ideally how do we work with the agency subject to the Biking Micromobility Program business case landing to figure out how do we get some co-investment and buy into that next stage of business case development. So in terms of what we'll look to fund, so for the City Centre to Uni Link, obviously the implementation funding, we've got $7 million there within this 3-year program. That is looking unlikely. So the question there is, what do we potentially look to do with that funding? The baseline recommendation from probably a staff perspective would be to look to defer that project to start in year 4, to potentially have an opportunity to come back in the next NLTP period, with an opportunity, if additional funding opportunities came up in the interim, to pull that money back. So that from a baseline perspective, we've still got the project there, and it's still anticipating co-investment. And then if co-funding opportunities happen sooner rather than later, then we want to make sure that we retain the opportunity to continue with delivery of that project. But I'm anticipating that there's probably not going to be a desire to potentially continue with delivery of that overall project or program of works without co-investment from Waka Kotahi.
Yeah.
And the early indications is that the preempt will become approved for that. So that allows us to get on and get the design work and that sort of thing going in year 2, 3, so that we are ready to go for years 4 onwards. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, that's right. So we are anticipating effectively a revised time frame out of this, that we'd spend this 3-year period focusing on delivery and implementation of the School Link program and the Connections program. We'd still get on with design of the city centre to Uni Link and hopefully land some more clarity around the bridge integrating into that delivery program as well, with an opportunity to come back in the next NLTP period, if not earlier, to look for additional funding opportunities to get into the delivery.
Yep.
Councillor Sarah, did you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is really an annual plan discussion, right? Because we might have some more clarity by then where things are at with, because there's supposed to be this climate emergency response fund coming in May in the budget, and there's the opportunity there for funding, which we should be getting ready for as much as possible. So I'd prefer to decide on that $7 million at annual plan time as to what we do with it. But my question is, with the pre-implementation money, which will likely be funded, could we, do you think you could still get, it's got $1 million for year 22 to 23 for both pre-implementation and implementation. Do you think you could still start the implementation in 22, 23 if we got that co-funding?
I think if we got the decision now and got underway with the design process, yes, I think that probably the 2023-24 period, you'd probably realistically be able to get underway with the delivery. I think the 22-23 is probably optimistic, given where we are now. But potentially you might be able to get, a ribbon cutting ceremony, but probably not substantial delivery.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
So just coming further down the list, just conscious of time, and sorry, we're getting towards the end. So the Cardi Arterials. So just wanted to have a quick chat on this one. So effectively, what this table's saying is we funded to a large program in our LTP. We put forward a bid in our NLTP for 51% subsidy across some of these projects, but we haven't actually budgeted for all of that in our long-term plan. So in our long-term plan, I think it was identified that the co-funding from Waka Kotahi was potentially unlikely. So conservatively, we put our best foot forward and put the bid forward, but we hadn't actually budgeted for that. So what you can see here, the funding approval for the pre-implementation phase is already approved. So that one's going okay. For these next 2 phases here, the $2.7 million and the 2.6, we'd actually only budgeted for $290,000 of revenue from Waka Kotahi in our LTP. So effectively, from a budget perspective, the majority of that program, other than this $549,000 in year 3, which is where the $290,000 revenue comes from, we can continue to deliver that program in accordance with our LTP funding allocations without co-funding. So from a budget implication, it's not significant, but the question for elected members still is, do you want to continue with effectively the design process around those Cardi arterial corridors over the next 2 to 3 years, without co-investment coming to HCC. So were there any specific questions on that one? Councillor Ryan, did you have a question on that one or comment?
Yeah, I'm just struggling a little bit with some of this, Chris, given that we're kind of nibbling away at this. I mean, if there's surplus funding it doesn't actually, this is council funding, it doesn't actually just become a roading conversation. This now becomes, I feel like a bit like Gary Mallet, but this actually becomes HCC funds and needs to be taken in context with our whole budget. You know, this could be money for the zoo, it could be money for, you know, a whole bunch of different things. And it kind of feels like we're just cherry picking things out of context. I mean, we just approved last week Onion Road potentially bringing to, you know, an annual plan. Shouldn't some of this funding go to cover that?
So effectively what this project is saying is that we've budgeted in our long-term plan to deliver this program, and we've effectively budgeted to deliver it without Waka Kotahi subsidy. So so it hasn't been approved in the NLTP because we had a go at getting some co-funding, but we weren't successful. So we're not asking for additional funding effectively to keep this project moving. Yeah. So we've budgeted basically the entire local share to deliver this program, if that makes sense.
I'm a little bit confused, but also Chris may be able to, or you might be able to shed light on this too. Our bid for the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, there's also potential funding in there that we might use for the CBD bridge. There's the Rotokauri aspects that we might be able to use for some of this. So there's also that default funding. I know it's not, you can't bank on it, but I don't know where all that fits into this.
Chris Allen, did you have a comment on any of that? If you can hear us and your internet's better.
I've jumped onto my iPad. Look, I don't, in my own view, in terms of Rotokauri Arterials, that's budgeted and planned, and we should be proceeding. And in my view, it'd be wrong not to. You know, what Chris was trying to say is we took a punt in the flyer and we put in a bid to NLTP and not expecting to get any funding, and we didn't. You know, but notwithstanding that, we've budgeted to keep progressing Rotokauri Arterial. So Ryan, you're right. They put the Rotokauri as a reserve in the IAF bid. You know, but everything we're hearing is, you know, making progress on the planning of that and getting more certainty around it is really important. So we're coming to a point now where we're going to lodge our designations, and the funding in there is you know, funding to just support our designations and maybe do some preliminary design of small sections. So I think it would definitely be the wrong thing to do to reallocate that money, and I'm not sure that's what Chris was suggesting, but yeah. So yep. So the IAF bid may come through on the reserve thing. In terms of the Central City bid and the bridge in there, I'm not 100% close to that, but I pick up that what you're saying and trying to weave that into the IAF bid, and I'm sure that's what the team are doing. Yes.
Guys, I think we have to jump off this link now for the council meeting, which is due at 3.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was going to say that, Mark.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
hello.
thank you.
Yeah, there we go.
Look, is it okay if Chris or whoever's leading this particular session, which I'm not, but if is it okay if the rest of the questions got taken offline? Have you got enough to be going on with staff?
Yep, we've got some good feedback from today, thank you. But if people do have other comments or questions or thoughts that come through, yeah, feel free to get in touch, probably with myself or Robin or the GMs yeah, but really appreciate the engagement through the session. It's been good session from our perspective. Thank you.
And the next time we touch it, if we could also have some understanding of what might be discussed through the LTP, because I thought Ryan raised some really good questions, and just keeping that balance and that transparency about when we move costs is really, because we're just about into the annual plan now, the run up anyway, aren't we?
Yeah, and that was all. I guess we're really keen on understanding for this year, getting an idea as to what you'd like to include through the annual plan process. So I guess for Councillor Ryan, it's not committing you to those out years, it's just what sort of things would we put up through that annual plan process for you to consider in amongst all the other things that you have to do. It's really trying to land something for this year that we're after. My last thing would be have a think about what you want for public transport, if anything, to be delivered this year.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Angela and I will catch up probably tomorrow by conversations, next steps for some of this. Brilliant.